Welcome to Story Hour, a virtual meetup hosted by Wolf and Heron.
Stephanie,
okay,
the stage is yours.
This is a story that we've been trying to work for a long time. So here's another version and we'll see how it goes. In the second Jungle Book, Rudyard Kipling included a poem featuring the law of the jungle, as known by the wolves. The poem is taught to the wolf offspring, and it describes how a wolf should behave in order to prosper. When I first read this poem in high school, I stopped at the fourth line and read it over and over again as shivers ran up and down my spine. For the strength of the wolf, or strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. The strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack. These words struck a chord. Never before had I seen words that so nicely summed up the relationship between leader and team. The rest of the poem goes on to explain the roles of the various pack members and how they're expected to respect each other, care for each other, and honor each other. There's even a line about how a wolf should navigate a disagreement with another wolf privately without risking the harmony of the pack. In grad school, the words of Kipling's poem kept returning to me as I studied management and organizations and developed a fascination with positive leadership. In another universe far away from me, young Kara would watch the great blue herons poke around the lake waters of upstate New York. She'd see them hunting fish in complete stillness and then take flight with wings that never ceased to amaze. There's something about their ability to exist calmly and freely on land, in water, and in air that tugged at Kara. One evening, she sat with her mother in the kitchen discussing the challenges of teenage life. Everything was going wrong. People were mean. Things weren't working out. You know the drama. Kara's mother looked at her and said, when you're in a situation you don't like, you've got two choices. You either change your situation or you change your attitude. These words instantly brought to mind the image of the heron. It was a perfect representation of the kind of adaptability her mother was talking about. Herons never seem flustered. They are alert but calm. And when things don't work out, they take control and change their environment. In grad school, her mom's advice in the image of the heron kept returning to her as she explored the same management and organization classes that I took, and also developed a fascination with positive leadership. Years later, the two of us sat on the phone discussing possible names for the leadership business we wanted to create. Less than 20 minutes in, both the wolf and the heron entered our conversation. I got those same shivers. What better way to honor our personal journeys to that moment and illustrate our point of view on leadership than to allow these two animals to represent us? And thus was born Wolf and Heron.
Yay!
All right, that was just about 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. I was aiming for short and tight. So
yeah. All right, what was powerful about Stephanie's story? Yeah, Molly.
I mean, I'm trying to think of if I didn't know you guys, like coming in new to that story and not catching the wolf and the heron, because I obviously kind of knew where it was going. But I feel like if it was a new experience for me, I would just feel like it's a perfect Kismet story. Like, it's just like you're describing sort of how like the two of you connected, and we've all had those moments where just something fits. And I think you describe both of those things really well. And so I got the shivers too.
Oh. What else? I really appreciated your, it was like the first 30, 45 seconds, I think, the tone that you had and the pace that you had. Your tone was deeper and you were slower than when you got into, like, I don't know, the third paragraph maybe. And it was the Rudyard Kipling and the wolf. And there was something about that just drew me in almost, regardless actually of what you were saying. There was something about the tone that I found quite compelling, because it was like you were taking what you were saying very seriously.
Mm.
Yes, Arman.
I have a couple, actually. I think I was just writing down to have a comprehensive list. I think you did a great job with the scenes. I could see the heron scene. I actually saw once in real life that herons were like catching fish from the water. So it brought that scene up for me. That was pretty good. I think the evolution within the story was also the same feedback you gave me. I think it was pretty interesting to see how you both came from two different places in life, and then you started Wolf and Heron. I really enjoyed that part too. You did invite curiosity pretty well by saying that this poem that I read, and I was just waiting to hear what it is, like what changed Stephanie's life so dramatically, and then emphasizing it and reading it twice. I think that was also really, really helpful. And finally, I really like adding the leadership lesson. You did have a leadership lesson in there from thanks to Kara's mom. the fact that, when things are not going the way you want, you either change them or you change your attitude. I think that was kind of a side story for me that was really interesting. I wrote it down. I was like, that's an interesting takeaway too. Overall, super strong story. I love to first know the background, the backstory of Wolf and Heron, and also the the story of you two as individuals.
Yes, Sarah.
Okay, so since I've started working with you guys, I probably have a new appreciation for how well you use pauses.
Yeah.
I feel like in storytelling, a pause to take a break can feel like 45 minutes long. And as I'm listening to your story, what I kind of was thinking was, if you didn't have such excellent pausing and they were just very punchy. And it also allowed me, because it was so visual, it allowed my brain to process all of those like pictures you were painting us and kind of catch up and still stay in the story. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, I think it's actually a good example for editing too, and cutting out context and transitions, right? We were in several different moments, but none of them lasted that long, and yet each of them felt rich enough. And there wasn't really a lot of fluff there. And that's how you got to 3 minutes. And it probably would have been easier for you to tell it as something that's 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 8 minutes long. And so actually, I think that's something for us to think about too, in terms of, we have this 5 minute rule and it's somewhat arbitrary. And every now and then a great reminder to, if you have the time, because it does take more time to edit back and make something shorter. I think that can be quite valuable, because it helps it feel really, really clear, focused only on the most important things. And there's not a lot of fluff. It's just those relevant details. And that makes it kind of easier to hold on to, easier to focus, easier to remember as well.
This is, I think, just a build off of that point. When you do take this story onto social media or different formats, that those pauses where you have it, those 30-second clips are like small sound bites. That's what's going to be that TikTok video. That's what's going to be that Instagram reel. And that's how those are so engaging for people. There's no fluff. There is no context. It's one hit after another. And then that's the rhythm and the beat that keep people engaged. So just thinking about broader storytelling aspects.
Connie, you're so good at figuring out how to apply this to our social media.
Yeah, we appreciate all the advice in that area.
We need as much help as we can get.
Even if we can't execute on it. What are some ideas for experiments or things that Stephanie could tweak next time? Yeah, Molly.
I have a couple ideas. One was, might not be possible depending on the poem, but I love like book endings. So maybe if there's some other part of the poem that, is resonant to like you two coming together, like bringing that up too. Or another poem maybe that like you love. And then another thing is, if this was a story that was rooted more about you, Stephanie, and less like about the collective, also having a little bit at the end that goes back to how this experience relates to you as a person, and just like a little bit more like of a deeper sense of who you are coming out of that kind of kismet connection.
Yeah, that's good. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I would see that depending on the context, I would want to have that in or not. Yeah, that's useful to think about.
Yeah, Armand.
Actually, as a piggybacking to Molly's comment, I think if you could explain a little bit more that how you two fit together and how you complement each other based on your personality. Like Stephanie, you can say like, I have this like wolf thinking attitude of supporting each other, so we're both strong together, and then Kara brings like patience and peace to our collaboration and to our team, or something along those lines. I mean, if that is true, I think that would be really beautiful in saying that how you two became the co-inventor of Wolf and Heron, and how you complete each other, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the ideas that was coming to my mind, and it's probably not in every iteration of sharing the story, but perhaps in some of them, would be to take it to a moment like you took it to us creating Wolf and Heron. Mm-hmm. And then maybe is there a check-in? Because now it's been almost 7 years of how we've seen either Wolf and Heron or you and I play out, or the bit like something about the business that reinforces and is a next step to the part that came before. You know, that could be kind of interesting.
I have several questions if we have time.
We have time.
Okay. So, one question is, there's like 45 scenes in this story. And I was, as I was editing it, I kept trying to figure out how to make the scene structure simpler, because it was just like, I have 3 scenes in my childhood before I hit grad school, and there's like 3 or 4 scenes in your childhood before you hit grad school. And then there's the scene of us trying to come up with a name, and it's just like so many scenes. And so I was like, is there a moment that's easy enough to cut or feels like something that is unnecessary? Or is it as tight as it's going to get?
Actually, so this is just one that is coming to mind for me right now. And I don't remember who mentioned this, but say you were to tell it not as a joint story, but as from your perspective, you could wait to have anything related to the Heron happen until you and I are contemplating the business name in a way, right? Like you don't need to have this, like, meanwhile, back when Kara was young.
Right. It could be a flashback scene while we're on the phone.
Yeah. And then naturally, I think you would,
that would make it tighter.
smaller.
Yeah. That would make it tighter.
Yeah.
That's an idea. Okay. Also, I wrote this story before I spoke it. And so when I was reading it to you all, it felt very written. So I was wondering if any of you had thoughts about how I could make it feel more extemporaneous and orally told, as opposed to this like literary written, manuscript. Molly.
There's a point in your story where you were talking about Kara being younger and talking with her mom during like teenage struggles, and you're like, everything's wrong, like that stuff. More of that. It like, I always write my stories before I tell them, because I'm too anal to not do that. And that's just the only way I can make it seem not totally written.
So what you're suggesting is like just more,
like
emoting.
Yeah, and more like variation in tone, and even like sometimes, and I do this too much sometimes, but like fillers of and likes, and we kind of tell people not to do that, but I also think that's just how people talk nowadays. And when people sound like they're authentically off the cuff, that's what they sound like. So I mean, and it's a balance, right? Because you don't want to force those in where they shouldn't be, and you don't want to then grow into a habit, I guess. But I think sometimes that just like alleviates some of the stickiness of the written word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Connie.
and I know I sound like this like social media pusher, and I'm really not that big of a social media person, but if you just open TikTok and just watch a couple of those videos, they're so authentic, real in the moment. It's as if they're just like, these are my like ponderings on a Sunday morning. And like, let me tell you about it. And there are the likes, there are the there are that vernacular that becomes not written word. And so pristine and perfect, but yet it really actually becomes relatable because of those errors or like faults, as if you're not on stage, right? Telling this story. So it's a different venue.
Yeah.
So if you were to practice just getting them like in 6-second bites or whatever the TikTok limit is now, and they do one take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
they call it.
It is like Molly just put in the comments. It's like a blend. You've got the written version. Now you have to deconstruct it and go back to scenes on index cards that don't have full sentences and record yourself telling it, listen to the two, grab parts and pieces from each, and be comfortable. You know, this is the stuff we tell the people we're coaching, be comfortable with it not being 100% memorized is kind of one of the best ways to have it not come off 100% memorized.
Yeah.
Abednego.
Okay. Firstly, I would like to say thanks to both of you for the beautiful stories of introductions that was made, and thanks for the platforms. I think one thing I will recommend is that in the introductions, maybe you can try to not only about what you are doing at this present movement, but what you have gone through and how you accomplish that and how you overcome that. Because sometimes you and I are best introduced in circumstances and how you overcome the circumstances. So if you're giving references during your growing up or during your movement at certain times, what are some instances or some circumstances that you encountered and how did you overcome that? Because that's alone tells your innate and your natural abilities on how you can stand. So that can also be the motivations to the audience that tells who you are and what really you stand for. So that's just my input.
Yeah, that reminds me actually of the comment, I think, Stephanie, that you made earlier about evolution and change and incorporating that into your story as well. Yeah. Armand.
Stephanie, I was going to say, I know it's kind of a different style, but maybe just don't write it. Like I can never write the stories. I'll always have like 3 bullet points, like the neighbor conversation, Texas, something to wrap it up. Just having maybe start with bullet points and just improvise if you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I know it's different styles, and I can never write the full story, so that's my weakness. It's always in the scene and I'm developing it, but it may help you with not being like a written, like fully structured story with fully structured sense. Like even forgetting a piece is, I think, part of the story. Like in the middle, it's like, oh, what was I going to say? Like, what was that piece? I missed that one piece that I wanted to say, right? That's kind of what makes it a bit more relatable in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
There's a happy medium there.
I know, if I do just bullet points, I end up telling a 9-minute story. So, like,
well, yeah, that's another, like, play to your strengths too, right? Like the process for this type of thing and just in developing a story in general is going to be a little bit different for each person, depending on how it's easy for them to process their memories and or what feels like the most comfortable way to refine and craft. And I think that the better you can understand yourself and what works for you, the better off you'll be. Thanks for your questions, Stephanie. Thanks everyone for your feedback.
Visit wolfandheron.com to find out more about our story hours.